superintendent of schools. And we're all here, obviously, to discuss some of the findings. It'll be a formal presentation by two of the scientists from the Camden County Department of Health and some of their efforts that they have done this fall relative to air quality standards inside Ann Middle School. With us tonight, just so we know, we have Chris Costa and Nancy Wilson. And have you both been here for each of the tests? I know you have for each of the tests.
I was not here for the first set, but the second.
The initial set, okay, but you've been here since. And earlier this afternoon, obviously, as I think Mr. Tro had sent a Global Connect out, we did meet with those staff members who were curious. They were issued, obviously, the same reports that you all have. I know that the reports that Nancy Wilson has authored have come back specifically on the instrumental music room. She'll speak to that. We do have some issues to do with housekeeping, custodial, and they have some asked us to do some recommended work in that area. So I'm sure that you can answer questions that the parents would have. So if you haven't gotten the reports, there are, I believe, 5 reports that have been issued by Ms. Wilson since the school year began. And so if you want to pick it up.
Sure.
And you're going to answer the questions. And
We're going to
hopefully
kind of
if
go
there's
over
any.
what we did, and then we'll answer questions.
Fine. Okay. Nancy Wilson.
I'll move a little closer so you can hear me.
Okay.
All right, well, I want to give you a little history first of our air quality program. Our health officer was here earlier today. He couldn't make it tonight, but he was able to explain that to the teachers, and I thought it would be a good idea to do the same thing. We are the only county in the whole state that has an indoor air quality program. And he brought that up today to let you know that how lucky you are to be in Camden County to actually use our services. And the reason we brought that up, again, is because we are impartial. We are not political. We have nothing to gain by working for the district. We don't work for the district, we work for you. We work for the health and safety of the teachers in this building, the children in the building, the staff. So we would have no reason at all to accommodate what anybody would ask us to do, and that would negatively impact the indoor air quality, which they wouldn't do anyway. Every time there's a problem, and I've known Sonny for many years now, anytime there's been a problem, he picks up the phone and he says, "Can you please come right now?" We try to get there right then. Sometimes we don't. Sometimes it's a day or two later. But I will be honest with you and tell you, there are some districts, there's some school districts in Camden County that do not call us, that they get complaints from their teachers and parents and never tell us, never let us in their buildings. So I'm thankful that Gloucester Township does welcome us, and they may not always like what we say we found or they have to do, but they do it. So I just want to give you a little bit of a history on that. We started off this school year, I want to say around October 26th, and my dates might be a little bit off, but you have 5 reports in front of you. The first time we came out, we were here because of the G-Wing, odors in one of the classrooms. Teacher had a little bit of an odor problem, so we came out, we did formaldehyde testing, carbon dioxide, carbon monoxide, relative humidity, temperature, and we did an air sample for mold. We came back with nothing on anything to do with mold. Relative humidity was fine. The only thing we came back on was an elevated carbon dioxide, but it was very slightly elevated. What we like to see, there's 2 different standards. ASHRAE says, that's American Society of Heating and Refrigeration, they put out standards. They say that you should be 700 ppm plus the background. Background's usually around 500. So they go off of 1200. All right. Then there's the New Jersey POSH, which says 1000 ppm. Now, between the 2 of them, we usually go off of the ASHRAE standards because it's hard to keep a building under 1,000 parts per million. But all that regulation says is that at that point, if you've reached that, then you should you should have a certified HVAC contractor check all of your systems to make sure that they're operating correctly. So when we came in here in October and found that, Sonny was with us. We said, "You're a little bit elevated. You were at 1,500. Remember I said, 1,200 is where we'd like to be. So it was a little bit elevated, but he had the system fixed. There was a belt broken, right? And we came back the following week and everything was back to normal. It was around 800, the levels. However, there were some questions from the teachers earlier that, well, gee, 1,500 is really high. No, 1,500 is not high. I'm going to turn it over to you. Do you remember the numbers from this afternoon?
So to touch on what Nancy was saying a little bit, we tend to use the ASHRAE standard a little more because conditions outside are always changing. As you can tell from some of our reports, some days it was around 400 parts per million outside, some days it's closer to 6. So with that fluctuation, we like to use the 700 above the background. That being said, the OSHA standards for CO2 or carbon dioxide, the TWA is the time-weighted average for an 8-hour workday. OSHA says that you can be exposed for up to 5,000 parts per million throughout an 8-hour workday. Obviously, 1,200 is well below that limit. And then, again, the IDLH, or immediately dangerous to life and health, is 40,000 parts per million. So, again, we're well below those numbers.
Yeah, so the 1,500 was really not that much of a concern, but they fixed it, it's lower, we're good. And we came back, when we came back to check, the day that I came back to check to see that the levels in the G-Wing, it was G-Wing, that the levels were lower and everything was good, one of the teachers grabbed me, and I had an intern with me, I'm training, and I had to get him back. So the teacher grabbed me and said, can you check the band room real quick for CO2? I'm like, okay, well, I'll just run on my way out and I'll check the band room. So I did that, and when I walked in there, the levels were maybe 800, 900, they were fine, and just as I had that level, they started to play their wind instruments. Well, it was actually funny because when they played their wind instruments, we went up around 1,100. So yeah, so we kind of laughed at that, and I said to Sonny, I'm like, well, you know what? Maybe even though it's normally 800, let's kick it up a bit with the fresh air, and open the dampers and make it a little bit more fresh air in here. And he did. Now, when I was there, I didn't look around, I didn't look up, down. I was on my way out the door, and I just did a favor to the teacher and ran in. Okay. And I later got a little bit, people were not happy, like, why didn't you look up? Because I wasn't there for the inspection at that time. I was just monitoring on the way out the door. But I said to Sonny, I said, well, we're here, and the principal, I said to them, well, we're here now, we see it, but we'll be back to do a full inspection of everything in a couple of days for CO2 when they were going to correct it. At that point, then I got a phone call Thursday morning that there were some moldy ceiling tiles. Great, we'll be back after check the CO2 anyway. So when we came out, we saw a couple of moldy ceiling tiles, which we routinely see in buildings, county buildings. Chris and I inspect the county buildings. We have 50 buildings. We try and make them at least once a year, and we go around with a list. This one's dirty, this one's dirty. The reason you have so many dirty is because wherever you have water lines or air conditioners, you're going to get some dripping. You're going to get condensation. Routine maintenance. In the county buildings, we look, we pull the ceiling tile down. If there's no insulation, life is good. You just go ahead and change it. But when we were here on Thursday, we knew that there were some issues and concerns in the building. So we decided not to have them remove the ceiling tiles, that we weren't going to touch them and spread any spores. We were going to do air samples. The district said, no, whatever the cost is for lab fees. So we did air samples to make sure before they pulled them down that the air was not, there was no fungal particulate matter in the air. Just in case there were any questions of why we did that. So after we did the air samples and we're off to the lab, we try not to contaminate or move things around. After that, we looked above, and there's no insulation in the band room above the ceiling tiles. However, there is a pipe. I think it was a water line from the boiler, cold water line. Okay, so in that cold water line, the building's now 20 years old. You had a little split, a little air gap in between where the insulation meets each other. So that air gap, there was a very small amount of growth around that. What looked like mold growth. And so that's why we decided to do the air samples. Now, there's 3 different rooms, and we saw that in the 3 different rooms. Very, very minor. EPA guidelines say if you see fungal growth more than 10 square feet, you hire a contractor. If it's less than 10 square feet, you can just tear it out, throw it away. Normally, that's what we recommend, and that's what we do. Because it's a sensitive issue in the building, we and the district together decided that we weren't going to do that. We were going to sample wait for the results to come back, and go with our plan of action. So the results that you have in front of you show that there was no fungal growth in the air. There were we do non-viable samples, which is live and dead spores. We did not have any levels of fungal growth in the air that would indicate water damage. So the health officer was here today and decided that it was okay for the district to just go ahead and do the routine maintenance, which is the ceiling tiles and a little bit less than 10 square feet of insulation. However, they happen to have an air scrubber, so they're going to bring the HEPA air scrubber in just as a precaution. And we also did some tape samples, and the tape samples in the child study room on the diffuser looks just like this one. We saw a little bit of specks. We also saw it in another area. We thought it was just dust, and we sampled it in the nurse's room. It was just dust. But in the child study room, there's four or five different rooms? Right. They all share an air handling system. That air handling system is probably large. So in the summer months, it turns on and off too much because it's very large. So you're always going, just like you see it on your windowsills at home, you're going to get a little bit of spots. Again, a housekeeping issue. That should be wiped, it should be kept clean, and somebody missed it and didn't do it. But now we saw the little specks. We know that what it turned out to be was cladosporium. Cladosporium is an outdoor mold. We have it on us now, it's everywhere. You can't get rid of cladosporium. But it also tells us that it's just because you had a little moisture droplets and it attaches and it's there. So we weren't really concerned about it, but they're going to have the ductwork cleaned and they're going to wipe it and run the air scrubber in there. Am I missing any pieces?
But you're going to come and test before we do it.
Yes,
We're going to do
okay.
the work, and then after we do the work, you're going to come and test again, correct?
Yes, because when we did that particular room, we didn't do an air sample because we didn't think there was any issue in there. We came on Sunday again, and we were here for 4 hours. I can't tell you how many samples we did. Maybe you remember. How many air samples?
We did 11 air samples and then one swab sample.
Okay, so we did a lot of samples, and the one tape sample that I think I took on Thursday, I was very surprised that it came back a little cladosporium. But again, I cannot go around any house that doesn't have, did anybody ever see on the windowsill, little black dots? That's cladosporium. Usually when I swab it, that's what it is. That's the outdoor mold in the condensation. So we came up with a little bit of that, and we did not do an air sample in that room. We didn't think there was an issue, so we didn't. But Chris is going to come tomorrow and do an air sample, and then the district is going to clean everything over the weekend, and we're going to come back and do another air sample. Not normally what we would do for a little spot of something, but we're going to, or they're going to. And we're also going to test in the band room, right, after they remove the ceiling tiles. Okay? So, do you have anything to add? Oh, and chemical testing. We had a complaint in one of the rooms about odors, so we brought in a volatile organic compound instrument, which will kind of pick up anything that volatilizes off. We came up 0. We went outside. There's some storm drains outside the G-wing. We went and tested inside the storm drains. We came up with 0. A couple of years ago, I'm bringing this up because one of the teachers brought it up today. A couple of years ago, there were some concerns about illness in the building. So Chris and I came out, we did mercury testing, we did, because it used to be a farm, so we said we would do some mercury testing. We came back 0 on all the mercury tests. We routinely do formaldehyde, that's always come back 0. And
VOCs as well, and then carbon dioxide, and we did all mold testing then as well too.
so what we came up with to help in the future, and as I said, our health officer was here today, and he said this was okay, and they're going to do a health and safety committee in the school. Is that what you're going to call it, right?
Yeah, just a couple things, and I guess I'll shift back
Sure.
to the administration. I'll stand up. In Bowen seems to be, every couple of years, an issue for all of us to address, and I know that Chris and Nancy have been here when asked. They are pretty much the standard, not only in Mullen, but in other schools in our district. They have been out in other schools in our district this year. So every time they come out, they do issue a report. Many times they find no findings, similar to the report you have tonight, but they do in other occasions, find that we have issues and we allow the facilities department to respond to it. In the case of a couple years ago, it was quite a big issue because the air handling systems, the air conditioning system in Ann Mullen had failed and it was replaced, and it was about $1.7 million. So a lot of the humidity issues that were prevailing a couple years ago, unfortunately, it seems as though we've kind of taken our foot off the gas and we're all back in here again. So I had, after you did all your testing last week, asked Nancy, rather than us being the district that's always reactive to parent or staff or student complaints, why can't we be proactive in a building that seems to be just one that people are, you know, kind of on edge and they believe they have a history. So originally, Nancy said, Ms. Wilson said, I can come back, instead of you calling us, I'll just put you on a quarterly basis of doing air samples throughout the building and issue reports, and we will publish them and hand them out like we've done this evening. When this became a little bit more magnified as an issue, they began to call us and say, what more can we do? And I said, well, you know, until we kind of get out in front of this and get a little bit more information and evidence to those parents and to those staff members, why don't you come out on a monthly basis? She checked with her superiors, and the county for the next 12 months has agreed to come out on a monthly basis to Ann Mullen. Instead of reacting to us, let's be a little bit, you know, progressive. Part and parcel to what Nancy just referred to, we've had meetings with the teachers union this past week and staff within the building, and the president of the union had talked about an idea, actually Mr. Umar had brought up at the table, of issuing in the school a health and safety committee. Health and safety committee would be made up of administration in the building, staff members in the building, custodian, a representative enough people that would get the reports, be able to speak to the county health officials, and in turn speak to their own staff on a two-way communication basis, that if there were problems not being solved, and certainly there have been some housekeeping issues in here. It's amazing when things get magnified, when people start telling you what isn't happening in the building. So we're trying to be a good steward in regards to being proactive in the district. So I appreciate the county coming out. I know that Mrs. McDermott wants to have that health and safety committee. She actually asked, and I think it's a good idea, that we establish them in more than just Ann Mullen School. Last year or the year before, there were questions about Union Valley. And so, you know, these two schools are not the only schools in the district that people, you know, raise their hand and say, you know, what about this? And if they don't feel as they have a voice or they're being ignored, hopefully these committees will be some kind of a segue to be addressed. So they will be established. Hopefully we'll have them intact in the month of December moving forward. So they did ask today how both Chris and Nancy could be used. Instead of randomly going around Mullen, could they identify areas that they have concerns, and they actually prefer to go to areas that staff have concerns, that rather than just randomly orbiting the building. So I think that's what you're...
Yes, and know what the concerns are. I mean, the one teacher that spoke later today said that she was concerned of chronic illness and things like that, and a little bit more of a chemical issue. So we would want to know, do you think it's a water problem? Do you think it's, you know, because there's a lot of pieces of equipment that we could bring out, but we're not going to bring everything out unless, you know, if you think it's a mold problem, we're going to test for mold.
Sure.
If you think it might be chemical, then we have to borrow the chemical instruments because we only have one in the whole county for all of us for hazardous materials and stuff. So a little bit of an idea of what you might want to check on. I mean, we'll check the whole building, that's fine, but it took us 4 hours on Sunday. With two of us, it's a lot of work. We don't mind that. It'll be a lot better. I think you would utilize our services a lot better if we knew what the problems were and what you wanted us to check.
I want to remind everybody, Ann Mullen is a very big building. It's 175,000 square feet. It's as big as any high school, and it has an array of equipment running through the different ductworks, and it has a life cycle like anything else. In your own home, you would replace air conditioning systems. You would also replace the roof. And we are coming up on that life cycle. This roof is not so good. And I know that with the Board of Education in my other role as business official, we've replaced 7 roofing systems. And I think they were all successful jobs. Certainly Ann Mullen and Union Valley are on the short list of getting that done. So a project to do a roof like this is not done with a snap of a finger, because if you want to do it correctly, you should have a good pace to it. One of the district goals, if you don't know, and I don't want to belabor it, but there are 2 district goals that the board has set forth. The second is to develop something called the long-range facility plan. It essentially is the Bible of everything physical that we should do to our school buildings. Boiler systems, roofing systems, doors, windows, bathroom upgrades, you name it, tech labs. There's big talk about STEAM. So the labs that we have in all our middle schools are from a different era, and they're not what our kids deserve. So this long-range facility plan is developed by an architect. The board is about to finalize who that architect will be. That plan will be done sometime in the late spring, probably by the end of the school year. But that plan doesn't mean anything. It doesn't get a new roof at Mullen or UV or wherever the priority project is. So like a menu in a restaurant, you have to pull one of the projects off of that plan, and then you have to develop plans and set forth and have a capital improvement. Now this roof is going to be every bit of $4 or $5 million. So I would imagine the roof at Union Valley is going to be $3.5 to $4 million. So things like that, obviously there's a different role to find the financing to put on the roofs, but we've done it before, and I just want you to, it's not why you're here tonight, Nancy, but they all know that they hear there's leaks in the roof. And I know Mr. Tro's the outgoing principal, but he's heard it too. So how do you repair leaks in the roof? You can't keep putting Band-Aids and, you know, $10,000 here and there. I mean, this is a multi-million-dollar effort that we have in front of us. So I know that I kind of got sidetracked, but we do have leaks. Last week we counted every tile before the rainstorm on purpose. And we sent the same people right back out again after it rained to find out where the roof is leaking. So we could identify, and Mr. Umar, you have a roofing company coming out?
Yes.
They're going to go to those directed spots
That's tomorrow, yes.
with the, hopefully with the intent to stop those leaks.
Yes.
So on a temporary basis, obviously, we're trying to be a good steward and eliminate them, because if you have moisture, you have mold, right? That's what the chief health officer. And the health officer, I wish he were here. He actually has just moved into Gloucester Township, and actually his son will be attending here next year. His wife is also an educator, so he has obviously a vested interest, and he expressed it to the staff here, the ones that came this evening, that he wants Ann Mullen to be, you know, as fit as it can be, and he's obviously devoting his staff to that. So anyway, does anyone have any questions on the roof? Okay, sorry, Nancy, you want to?
No, that's okay. I know there's a lot of reports in front of you, and you might not have had a chance to look at them, but does anybody have any questions on how we do our testing, what methods we use, what these mean? Go ahead.
I'm just, so CO2 is separate from, has nothing to do with mold, that's just,
Yeah, it has nothing to do with mold. We exhale CO2, and we like to take readings more at the end of the day because children have been in the building for a while and they're breathing and talking and, you know. So if you have a high CO2, it's really because your HVAC system is not pulling out the air. It's supposed to pull the air out, take it through a system, and pull fresh air back in. So if you have a high CO2, it means you do not have enough fresh air coming in. A lot of times that means something's wrong with the system. In this situation in the G-Wing, the belt was down. No way of knowing that unless we come through with a CO2 meter. The other way would be is if sometimes teachers, did you ever see the univents? They're like boxes, it's called a univent, and you have the air conditioner and the heat, they're individual in each school. Okay.
In each classroom.
In each classroom.
Each classroom has a univent, it's the heater.
Oh, okay.
Sometimes-
It looks like
The
a,
blower.
okay.
I believe we'll call it the
Sometimes
blower or
we
the-
go in there to the classrooms, not here, but we've gone in many classrooms and found that the carbon dioxide was high because the teachers block the return. So now the air that's supposed to get recycled through doesn't come through. So carbon dioxide is not related at all. You're going to get mold when you have a high relative humidity or a water leak.
Yeah. Are there symptoms, like if carbon dioxide is too high in a classroom?
Well,
do you get-
we have to define too high, okay?
Right, I know what you're saying
Symptoms
is
are not
nothing
gonna-
is too high, right?
No, it is. With
is?
carbon dioxide, symptoms aren't going to come about until it's really high, okay? We're talking about over an 8-hour period, we like it to be around 700 plus the background. So background's usually 500. We like it to be about 1,200. I'll give you a little sidetrack, a little side note to that. If you have, and POSH says, if you have it at that level, all that they have to do is come out and check the HVAC. Now, I have been in some schools where they don't have an HVAC system, okay? Where they have radiator heat and they have no means for fresh air. In that situation, we've had a high CO2 and there's nothing to check, nothing we can do. We can just tell them to crack a window, okay?
Would headaches or kids with asthma be more affected by something?
In very high levels. Chris had mentioned the IDLH and the OSHA standard time-weighted average. Time-weighted average was what, 4,000? 5,000 over an 8-hour period. So we've never seen levels of 5,000, unless it was an industrial site. Okay,
I know
so
that
that's,
yeah. A lot of
you're-
parents saying kids with headaches coming
well,
home.
you do, when you have a building like this that's enclosed, you're going to have a lot of dryness. Our relative humidity, if you look, our relative humidity was less than 30% in most of the building. Now, it's supposed to be between 30 and 60%, but in public buildings, according to EPA, we never tell you to humidify, because then you're going to introduce water into the air, and you're introducing something for bacteria and mold to grow. So we don't recommend that, and we always just tell people, hey, if you really have dryness, go to the doctors, and the doctor's going to tell you use saline solutions. So, I mean, we're certainly not giving you doctor information, but that's generally what happens. We cannot tell the district to add humidity into the air. That just creates a bigger problem. I hate to say it like this, but that's a winter problem. Okay, if your heating is working,
Excuse me one second.
Sure.
I know that Mrs. Fickler, there was a meeting again on Friday to talk to the building and the building reps. And obviously, Mr. Umar was there. And on the systems, there are suggested intervals when the filters get changed out. And I was stunned at how many filters the system here needs. Notwithstanding that, Mr. Umar had already improved the quality of the filter being used with the new air conditioning system. But then I've asked him if the suggested filter change is, say, 2 times a year, I've asked him to increase it to, say, quarterly. And if it's quarterly, I've asked him to do it monthly. And I know it's going to be a little bit more money, but I think that, there's been a tension here, and, when you pull a filter, you're going to see if the system is actually collecting those particles. So just trying to, again, be a good steward and a little bit more proactive on it. The filters were being, I know that one of the staff members today even had asked the type, like HEPA quality or EPA standard, and you owe that information. I want to see that information too. We should be using high-quality filters. I'm sure we are, right? So I just wanted to answer that one question. It's not really maybe county health. She's talking about the dryness that winter
Yeah, I know.
seasonality
A lot
brings
of
on.
people have complained of their kids coming home with headaches, right?
and you will with it being really dry.
You're saying it's more a dry air type thing?
Yeah, because your relative humidity was definitely, I don't have the report, but I'm pretty sure it was around 19%. I remember it being about 19%.
It depends on the day.
But again, we would never tell any public building to increase humidity. It's just a wintertime issue. But I hope I answered your question about the carbon dioxide. If,
Yeah, because
We would only-
non-scientists, it's like, ooh.
okay,
that's
and I've been
something.
doing this for 25 years, so I've been in a lot of buildings, and I've seen a lot of really, really bad problems. And the highest I've ever seen in a school was probably between 3,000 and 4,000. And in that case, if I walked into a building and they had between 3,000 and 4,000, I'm going to ask them to get everybody out. Not in an emergency response way, but like, hey, you might want to move them for a while or open a window because we don't want it at 3,000 or 4,000. But the levels here, if it's 2,000, I'm just going to give you a week to fix it. When you get to the 3,000, 4,000, 5,000 range, that's when we start to move people out.
When you measured those levels, there was no one in the classroom.
No, that's not true. I came at the end of the day.
Okay.
Some of them. The first three, I think I have 5 inspections here. The first 4 inspections were the end of the day so that the students were breathing. But the only time, the 5th one was Sunday because we had to get here and do some extra mold samples so that we'd have results back before the meeting. And there weren't any students in the classroom. But one of the times that we were here in the, I think one of the classrooms in the G wing,
G15, right.
yeah, somebody had just left and we still had the elevated readings that we had corrected later.
Can I ask a quick question? Is G15 Mrs. Thomas's room? It is? Okay.
Is it? Yes,
In the 8th grade hallway?
yes.
Okay. So, when you
Yeah, I didn't know where G is.
When you swab for the mold or whatever it is, so like there's the panels, how do you like swab the
Okay,
panel?
there's
Like, what
a
is
couple
that
different ways.
process?
I'm glad you asked that, thank you. For mold, what we normally do is an air sample. There's 2 types, there's viable and there's non-viable. We do non-viable. The reason we do non-viable is because it collects live and dead spores. You are just as allergic to the dead spores as you are the live spores. So we collect both. It's a little aerosol cassette. We put it on for 15 liters per minute for 5 minutes. That's the industry standard. So it's 75 liters of air that flows through. You could do one in a room like this. Take it to the laboratory. We use a laboratory in Marlton. They're a certified lab. They look under the microscope and they see the live and the dead spores. Years ago, we used to do the viable only. We don't like that because it doesn't pick up the one mold we're really worried about, which is Stachybotrys. It's a slimy mold. It doesn't become airborne very easily. So that's the air samples, which we always recommend doing an air sample before we do anything. Swab samples, we do them. Or slide samples, we do them. We don't really like them because, look, I can tell you something. If you can all pretty much say if there's a moldy ceiling tile, you know it's moldy. Okay, so we don't normally swab them because we know that it's mold. We're more worried about what's in the air and what has escaped and what's our remediation plan. But we do swab, or we'll use a little slide and we'll put tape on it. Last week when I was here and I was asked to do the child study room, I used a slide. That came back negative. This weekend, because we didn't have means to get our slides, we forgot them, my fault, I forgot them. I used a swab, which is perfectly fine, a clean swab. So either method. And then the laboratory usually takes sometimes up to 3 or 4 days, but in this situation, the district paid for a 1-day turnaround.
Is that a county lab?
No, not at all.
Is it an independent lab?
It's independent. It's MLab, P and K. They're in Marlton. And, I mean, we could use any lab, but we use them just because,
Do they have a certain credential?
yeah, they have to be certified, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, we use them just because that's, the person that originally started them was Dr. Yang, and Dr. Yang is a world-renowned mold specialist, mycologist, and he's really good. Since he's left there and gone somewhere else, but he's really good, and he was great with answering questions, and he does seminars and, you know, whatever you call it, in court proceedings. So that's why we use MLab, it just goes back for years.
Just M lab?
No, it's EM,
EM.
and then it's LAB, like separate, and then it's P and K. Yeah, they're all throughout the country. I mean, we've been asked to use different labs by different people that merged or whatever. We could certainly, if somebody didn't like the lab, would use whatever lab, we don't care.
So you were talking about where there's the one where you were able to say like, all right, above it there was the air gap and the pipe and there's like a little bit there. So do you, like, if you know that water's dripping, is it automatically this black, I don't know anything about
Well,
mold. Is
in the
like
music room, okay, mold will take 48 to 72. If you had a water leak in here, well, say it wasn't carpet, say it was tile, you had a water leak, you want it cleaned up right away. Within 48 to 72 hours, mold will start to grow. Okay, so with the mold up on the pipe rack, it could grow within 48 hours, or it could have been a long time. We go off of how much it is, and it's such a small amount. hoping I'm answering the question correctly. But there's no way of knowing what type of mold it is. You've heard the term black mold. Black mold, when the news says that, they're really referring to Stachybotrys. That's the mold that causes the hemorrhagic lung disease. You've all heard of that. That's why we do the non-viable spores. You're not really going to see that unless you have an ongoing water leak, like a lot of water, okay? Because that likes a lot of water. It's a slimy spore, and you need to have a high water activity to have that. The mold that you're going to get from on the pipe wrap is going to be just probably your basic aspergillus, penicillin, things like that. And I hope I'm not boring anybody with these terms, but so we know what types of mold to expect on different substrates and how long it is. Now, we can swab everything that we think, but if it's just starting, this is what we want to see in the future when we talk about maintenance. If it's just starting, just take it off. You know, if you see some water damage on a ceiling tile, or you see that every time a ceiling tile is changed, they should be looking above, they should be saying, hey, is that wet? We have a moisture meter, we can come out, we can check and see if it's wet. If that's wet, anything up there is wet, that needs to be removed right away. Okay, unless it's really large and you need a remediation contractor, but that hasn't been the case.
So it continues to drip, new tiles are put in place. So each tile is replaced over and over again, let's say because the leak can't get fixed. When you come out and do readings, like if there's mold on that pipe, but the tiles are being replaced, is that going to show in the air quality tests?
Well, if we're doing samples and we come out and we see a ceiling tile, we're automatically going to get on the ladder and climb up and look and see what's going on up there.
Let's say that that ceiling tile has been replaced, like let's say that that's part of what they do. Like they see it, they replace it, you come out, you don't know that they've replaced it. But we know that there was, you know, we know that this spot right here is an issue.
Well, I think that's why getting that environmental committee together is important, so we know the problem areas that keep reoccurring, and we know exactly what they're doing when they come out and switch it to ceiling tiles, and what they're replacing, so we can go out and take a look at those specific areas.
But let's say it's not complete.
I know you're asking,
Right.
are we going to come up with something? You know what?
Well,
Here, each air handling system in this building is different.
Right.
So I can't answer for all of them, all right? But some of them, and in the case with the G-Wing, you've got, I don't even know if that one works. Sometimes you have the makeup air going up into the ceiling cavity and mixing and then coming back down, and sometimes you don't. So if you had air going into the ceiling and mixing, and there were fungal spores up there, it's going to be back down. If that's not the case, and the ceiling tiles are like this, and here's the pipe wrap, and we come in along and we take our sample, and there's no air mixing from above the ceiling cavity down here, you're not going to get mold spores. But on a good note, the children aren't breathing mold spores either. Okay, so, and I understand your question, and one of the things that we can, did I answer it? Mm-hmm. So no, we wouldn't know, but if your children are breathing it, we're going to pick it up. One of the things that we could do is when the ceiling tiles are replaced, if we're going to do it once a month, we can come out and we can say, leave the ceiling tile down until we come out, and we can climb up there and we can take a look. Does that work? So every time a ceiling tile is changed, don't change it. Take it down, throw it out, and we'll look at it.
You mentioned that there are several air handlers in this building for the air conditioning unit. Are those air handlers connected in any way?
Sonny can tell you how many systems, right?
What was the question?
How many air handling systems are in this building?
In every classroom.
Every classroom in C, D, E, they're all independent, they all have their own separate units. All the offices have separate units, so somewhere maybe around 70 to maybe 80 air handlers, you know.
So if there was mold in one air handler system that has been replaced, there's no way for that mold to transfer to another air handler system?
Most likely not, because each classroom is independent.
What do you mean by most likely?
No, it's now going to be transferred from one room. You know, the only time you can get air coming in from the main corridor, if somebody opens something, if there's something in that main corridor, maybe it will go into the classroom. But the classroom itself has its own independent unit.
And how often do you clean those units, Sonny? Didn't you just clean them before summertime?
Yes. And also they get cleaned in Christmas time, during the Christmas break. But the air filters, you know, which we discussed now, we used to do them every 4 months. Now we're going to be doing them every month, you know, for every classroom.
I'm wondering about that because my daughter was here 2 years ago, and she actually had to be removed from, her entire class had to be removed from her science teacher's room. I believe Mr. Trey sent the letter out that you had just started because they had found mold in Mr. Albani's room. So that, then Mr. Villa said something about the air handler system was replaced. I'm just curious because I know that they've moved hallways and grades where Mr. Albania's room used to be in relation to all these new mold problems that have cropped up. And if somehow the systems could have somehow linked up.
No, if the air handling system in this room right here is its own air handling system, it's not going to transfer any mold spores to that. However, if I walk into a moldy room, or say I was out, if I did a job before I came here and it was really moldy, I'm not coming here to do mold tests because I'm going to contaminate my test, okay? If somebody just ran the vacuum and changed the vacuum bag inside, I'm not going to do a test. If somebody just threw out some moldy food, again, I'm not going to do a test because it's going to contaminate my test. So, because they are spores, and when you cut into a moldy strawberry, think of one moldy strawberry. I cut into that, I'm going to release 10,000 spores. Okay, so you're going to get more transferring from walking back and forth, but you're never going to transfer from one HVAC to another.
Pipe wrap, does that not contain an insulated feature to it? The wrapping the pipe has insulation?
Yeah, but the reason that this little bit has a little bit of mold on it is because it got an air gap, and so the condensation got on it.
Any condensation on any pipe wrap that's going to continue to leak or is going to continue to create condensation is going to continuously be wet.
And it's going to have to be replaced. As soon as it gets wet, it needs to be
Black
replaced.
mold needs a continuous form of water
Yes.
to continue to grow. If these pipe wraps are continuously wet, they're going to continuously feed black mold. If it's leaking on the ceiling tile, that's going to be any mold on it that you're saying is just the penicillin type of mold.
Well, if there's ever any leak, it should be replaced.
Continue to be wet, that can cause the black mold.
Well, nothing should continue to be wet. It's the moment something gets wet, they're going to take it out and replace it.
So they're replacing all the pipe wrap?
No, not all the pipe wrap.
A couple years ago, I mean,
No, excuse me.
Years ago, then we had the mold.
No, the pipe wrap only needs to be replaced where it is wet. And we have moisture meters to tell. So in other words, when the Health and Safety Committee comes back and says, we think the ceiling tiles, or we just say we come in and you removed 50 ceiling tiles. Well, we're going to get a ladder and we're going to go up and we're going to check that pipe wrap with a moisture meter and see if it's wet. And if it's wet, the district will replace it. If it's not wet, then they won't. Okay?
Pipe wrap should always be wet, because if you have a cold pipe, you have a warm ceiling, you have condensation where you're wet.
No, it shouldn't always be wet.
And then my second question is like,
I
there's
can,
mold in that ceiling.
I can answer that partly, and Sonny, you can correct me if I'm wrong. Where we have had issues, and where the county found issues before, and we fixed the issues that were identified. And one of the reasons we need to look up above the tiles is to see, when she talks about the gap, the reason the gap does it is now that pipe is exposed. So now you've got that cold pipe exposed to air, and you get condensation only where that pipe is exposed. So as long as the insulation is installed properly and wrapped properly, then what the insulation does is keep the condensation from occurring in the first place. And so everywhere where we've had problems, we had a mold remediation here 2 or 3 years ago, where there was a big air handler unit above the entryway here to the library. And that was a problem where it had been repaired several times. And when it was repaired, the pipe insulation was not put back on properly and reinstalled properly. And we had that situation in 2 or 3 parts of the building, and that was where we had issues with the condensation from that. As long as, and so what we had to do was cut things out, make sure it was insulated properly, that the joints where that was, that it was taped off properly, and then what that does is keep the, keep that from getting, that cold pipe from being exposed to the air where you get condensation and have the moisture problems.
So each one of those heating systems in each room is just that box you guys were talking about that mounts to the wall, like the returns in there, it's just a small box. So
Yes.
they'll use the whole ceiling as like a final ceiling and the whole return.
Correct. Correct.
Yes.
And also, do you guys need the air quality samples above the ceiling too at all, or no? I don't know if you touched on that.
No, well, it was brought up that when we do a sample, if there's mold above the ceiling, will we pick it up? The answer is, we're not sure if we would pick it up. It really depends on is there air that's coming from up to above. But if we don't pick up air, our goal is to sample what we're breathing to make sure that everyone's safe. If we don't pick it up where we're breathing, then it's really not a problem, would be the way some people.
Those oxygens aren't like airtight, like a sheep oxygen?
I really can't answer that because every situation is different. Every building has different air gaps and, so all I can say is if we do an air sample and no mold shows up, then it's probably not there, it's probably not a problem. But I can't say that, oh, there's no mold up there. The only way I can do that is every time a ceiling tile is wet, I need to get up there and I need to look. And I'm sure the moment we get up on a ladder and we look, if our ceiling tile is wet, if there's a little bit of mold growth, it's usually about, I want to say about not even a half an inch around those air gaps, they'll just replace it and put something back on and make sure the air gaps are sealed.
And when you were out, one of the times the last time we went through this, there were a few places where there were concerns like that, and we did remove tiles, and they did, I think it was two, you remember, Chris? It was 2 or 3 classrooms 2 or 3 years ago that we did test above the ceiling where people thought there were concerns, and then the samples came back negative.
Yeah, I was wondering, you said you would be coming out every month for this?
Yes,
For how long?
1 year.
For 1 year, okay. So, and to you, Superintendent, as far as being proactive with it rather than reactive, what happens after that year?
We'll come out quarterly.
Okay,
And if there's still issues, you can address our health officer and ask him.
okay, that's great.
He just committed us, there's only one other person that's certified to do this, so we're very short-staffed. So he committed us to that year, and then after that, if there's still issues here, by all means, we will address it and see what the county, time-wise, can have us do.
All right, so after that year.
We'll probably go to quarterly.
Right, all right, so after that year, you'll be doing it quarterly. Now, will the parents be issued quarterly reports as well with this, since this has already been a problem?
Anytime that you issue a report, we can make it available, correct? We're going to make every report available.
Okay.
I would imagine the county,
Knowledge.
I would imagine that the county health officer, just having a revelation that his son's going to attend here the next 3 years, I think he's got a vested interest in this building.
Absolutely.
So I would imagine that, after a year, he may, just repeat it, but I don't want to speak for him.
Okay, now, to add on to that, as far as, again, being proactive rather than reactive, is there something that's going to be better handled as far as preventative maintenance on all the equipment, just as far as daily inspection with, facility maintenance, as far as any of that? I mean, just because like you said, there are a million different components to the school as far as checking every single thing, and it's damn near impossible, pretty much. But, I mean, there's got to be some sort of diligence towards it. Am I correct?
I agree. We
Or
are.
there be more diligence, basically.
There has been a great deal of discussion about our current stewardship, and all the systems require routine maintenance, but we have quite a bit of staff here who are responsible for certain things too, and we are re-examining all those things, and we will be deploying a much more thorough approach towards all the buildings. And it's up to Mr. Umar and his staff to make sure that they come through and to make sure once he sets those standards, they're being abided by.
Given the current situation and what the county found, and now we have a need to do this monthly, why at the Board of Education meeting did you, Mr. Sani, and Ms. Rosado insist that there was no mold in Mullen School, that they had received no complaints whatsoever about mold or water issues or air quality issues? When a parent, 2 parents, and a teacher asked you about it at the meeting?
At the meeting, a teacher who had stood up, I know that she was indicating throughout the fall that she had an odor problem in her building. I don't know if it was mold related. I was mostly addressing at that meeting Mr. Umar and Ms. Rosado. I hadn't had any reports of mold in this building. don't know if I'm answering your question, but
Was
those,
that after we sampled G15 and G16? Because
Well-
they came back negative. The teacher that you're referring to with the odors, we went back and we did the CO2 and then we went back and we did mold samples.
Right.
And they're in the report.
but the question is, did the issue of mold come up at the public meeting? I don't know if the issue of mold came up at
Yeah,
the public meeting.
Yeah, you can watch
But
the
you
video
had
again.
results in your
Okay.
hand to say that, I don't know if you had results.
I didn't have
Yeah,
that,
you had the
but I-
results for
I
G.
did-
Maybe the administrators you put on the spot at the meeting might want to answer, when they had tiles that looked the way they did, that another parent took pictures of, that they could have stood there at a Board of Education meeting and said, there is no mold in Mullen. We've never had any complaints about mold in Mullen, when those pictures speak for themselves.
I was asked if there were any complaints about teachers coming, complaining about being sick or anything like that. I answered, honestly, nobody had come to me. The only person that had come, who had sent an email, was Mrs. Thomas, and that was October 5th. And immediately when she sent that email, I had contacted Mr. Umar, and I had let our head custodian know. So from there on, they went into that classroom. With regards to other teachers coming, no, sir. No other teachers had come and complained about anything.
You said that there was no mold in Mullen at the meeting.
October 26th is when you got the results that said that there was no mold in
G15.
G15. So you did have results
But
for
you
those.
you just said that you tested tiles, that you recognized that they had mold on them.
I came this weekend and tested. The
Did
results
you
that they...
recognize that that was mold on the
I
tiles?
wasn't in that building. I wasn't, I was only brought
Did
into...
you recognize that the tiles that are in the
Gee.
band room had mold on them?
When I was brought in last Thursday.
Okay, fine. That's after the Board of Education meeting I'm speaking of. Okay?
Okay, but
So,
Monday night.
if there was mold in Mullen, and you're standing up at a meeting and saying, everything's great, no complaints, no mold in Mullen, why is anyone going to believe you when the next day you have an open house and there's moldy tiles in classrooms?
I am
Why
one
would anyone
person,
believe
sir.
you?
I am one person. There are others that are also responsible of bringing things to my attention.
You're the
Okay?
one that stood up and said it. You didn't say, as far as I know, you said there's no mold in Mullen.
From that moment,
How
that moment, there
how
was-
can parents and teachers believe anything that's going on when you say that one night, the next night you have an open house, when you're putting your best foot forward, and these tiles are right there?
I understand that, but it wasn't brought to my attention. And from what I knew at that board meeting, no, there was no mold. So if it's not brought to my attention, I can't say, oh yes, I think there is, when it hasn't been brought to my attention. Whatever is brought to my attention, or Mr. Caesar, or anybody in the building, we'll address it. But if it's not brought to our attention, we have custodial staff as well, that if they see and they didn't address it or bring it to our attention, no,
So
sir.
it's the custodian's fault.
I didn't say that. I didn't say that. But we do have other people that also go in there that could have brought
The
it to our
kids?
attention.
Who else? Teachers?
Everybody, as a matter of fact, we're all in this building.
I have a couple questions. You said that if more than 10 square feet were visible with mold, then you would call in for remediation. Is,
No remediation contractor.
okay, is that per room?
Yeah, that's per area that's affected. Like if you went into, say this room here, if it were more than 10 square feet of visible, then that's when you would, more or
Okay.
less for, like, they have an air scrubber, okay? So they would be okay to do it, more or less to protect the person that's ripping it out.
Okay. You also said that you decided today that it was safe for the building to do routine maintenance.
I don't remember saying I
You did, you
decided
said
to-
you decided today that they can do routine maintenance. But they've been changing ceiling tiles frantically.
No, I'm sorry if it came out wrong. Okay, there's certain decisions that we don't make until we have mold samples in front of us, okay?
Like changing out ceiling tiles in a school?
No, ceiling tiles should be routinely changed all the time.
If they have mold, visible mold on them,
Yes,
they
yes.
should be changed. Even when you're in the other room checking moldy tiles, they should be changed.
Okay, any building that we walk in, I'll give you an example, vocational school, okay, because it's one of our buildings. We walk through once a year, we go through, we make a list. We look up, we see which ceiling tiles are a mess, and we have a maintenance person, and we say, that one, he comes along, he or she, they take it down, we move to the next room, then we go back. This is our inspections. Then we go back, after we get them all out of there, and then we look, we get ladders, and we go up and say, why was it moldy? Why was it wet? That's routinely what you do, because ceiling tiles, that's kind, I don't want to say it's their job.
But that's for a routine thing. You were here because there was an issue.
Okay, so I'm really sorry. I'm not understanding your question or what you're getting at. Maybe you could explain it.
You were worried about the band room. You were in the band room. You were testing the band room. In the meantime, in other areas of the school, and Mr. Bilodeau and Mrs. Forsythe is going to deny this, they were changing out moldy tiles. So I don't know if you previously tested that area to make sure it wasn't in the air or not, because you only tested certain areas.
In October, and then I came
Right.
to the band room in November.
Right, so they were the only areas that were checked for mold in the air.
Yes, because we wouldn't normally check for mold in the air unless there was a problem. Unless we
Right.
thought that, water intrusion.
And visible mold that looked like that should have really been
Well,
tested in the
I have
air?
to tell you, really, remember I said about one of the buildings, we wouldn't normally check for fungal particulate matter in the air for just a moldy ceiling tile. We wouldn't normally do that.
So in that
We did
band
here
room,
because it was a sensitive issue. No, we wouldn't normally do that.
there was at least 1, 2, 3
Now, remember I said there were less than 10 square feet, and we do a lot of schools in the county, so I.
in that tiny room.
For those couple of, and I know where the tiles were, okay?
In that, I'm talking about,
Yes.
go in, make a right, that
Yes.
room.
We would not normally do.
That was
air
more
samples.
than 10% square footage of the entire room, though.
No.
Maybe it wasn't 10 square feet altogether, but it's a tiny
We go
room.
off of the EPA guidelines, we also go off of another guideline called double ICRC, and that is the cleanup guidelines after there's been a water intrusive incident. So we go off of those guidelines, and again, any other school that we walk into, we would not do those samples. We only do it when people are worried, or there's an issue, or if there's something we're not sure about. Again, if we need to make a remedial plan, but generally, you don't make remedial plans for such a small amount.
Right. When you were out, and you personally came out 3 years ago,
Yeah.
too, because there was an issue with mold in Mullen, you said this is the numbers outside, this is the numbers inside, everything is safe. And then 2 areas of the school were remediated to the tune of $38,000.
I don't know what your question is.
Well, I'm
You
just
find a problem, you
saying that.
remediate, and then you.
Yeah, but you came to the meeting and said that there were no issues. There was everything, the air quality was fine, your kids are safe.
I only state what the scientific facts are, so I'd have to have mold samples in front of me.
You
And if I remember.
You did do that. When you were here 3 years ago, you,
And if at the time,
believe that the school board just wanted to be proactive because, there was slight evidence of mold. They weren't elevated numbers, but, it was comparable to what was outside, and they just wanted to be proactive and, make everyone feel better that they were in a safe environment.
so when you were called in, you only tested the areas that the school alerted you to, am I correct?
yes, that would be our normal routine.
Okay.
I would want to speak, though, for everyone here. Obviously, at the open house, when we have any guest, parent or otherwise, or any given day, staff or students are in the building, what the ceiling tiles resembled in the instrumental music room is unacceptable. I don't think anyone would say, yeah, that's the way we should be doing it. So it's a fact that it looks lousy and something should have been done. But when it was brought to our attention, we did our normal routine, as Ms. Wilson had said. They came out. It's still in that condition because we were waiting for what we should be doing to it. So obviously, we now have the report. We will be addressing it. And really, that's not the way any building should look in the district. So I know that there's separate matters to address how that ceiling came to be and was not addressed. So I just want to let you know that that is not the normal condition of any of our buildings, but I'm embarrassed to say it did exist. And obviously, I need to do something about it. So, Mrs. O'Donnell.
I sent you an email asking, over the weekend, I'll say Friday, Monday, whatever, I don't know if the custodians worked over the weekend, ceiling tiles were being replaced. And I asked you if any of those ceiling tiles with mold on them are being put aside to be tested. You sent me to Kathy Forsyth, who then responded to me, and after a lot of conversation back and forth, her words were, we didn't find any moldy ceiling tiles out of the band room.
Okay.
I
That wasn't
have
your question.
pictures of moldy ceiling tiles from other areas of the school. So my question is, why the dishonesty? Why the dishonesty?
Who's being dishonest?
Well, you pawned me off to Kathy Forsyth, but I'm going to assume that you stand behind what she says.
Well, I know that both the business and facilities offices made it a point that if there were tiles in the building that were unsightly, okay, to do something about it. Now, if
Who walked
they were-
around, can you tell me who did that? Who walked around and said, okay, that one needs to be removed, that one needs to be removed? Was it any administrators or was it just,
I don't know the answer to that.
There
But
were-
if there are staff complaints, and then administrators like Mr. Tro, Ms. Rosado came back and said they and certain staff members aren't getting to that, then if it went up another octave to get it addressed, yes, it was going to get done. Did it come from my desk? No,
to remove and replace all the ceiling tiles? It did not come from your desk.
no.
Did it come from Kathy Forsyth's
It
desk?
could have.
So who would have
But-
been the one to say, that one's not moldy, we don't have to worry about it, let's replace it?
I think that if any tile were stained
Or
rust,
moldy?
even if it wasn't shaped to fit either the 2x2 or the 4x4 grid, if it was just arced because of warping, I think that probably the order was fix it. Now-
Even if they were moldy?
Yeah, now I know Mr. Tro has told me repeatedly that the EPA, and Nancy and Chris, you can comment on it, that if a ceiling tile is wet, we don't really want to wait for it to become moldy.
But my,
Hold on, I
Mr.
didn't finish,
Villager,
I
my
didn't
point is,
finish.
they were moldy.
But I didn't finish.
They were
Is that-
moldy.
Okay, but I didn't finish. I'm going to get back to the moldy, or at least the appearance of mold. But when they're wet, is it true, Tim, that they should be, when they're observed to be wet, taken away, replaced? Or taken away, reported to facilities to fix the leak or potentially the sweaty pipe, and then replaced? Is there got to be a protocol, correct?
There
You
is.
have to get rid of them while they're wet. Or if they're moldy, get
They
rid of
were, they were a month old, so
Okay, well-
truthfully, 4 more days would not have made a
That's-
difference.
that's
They
the
were a
maintenance-
month old.
That's a maintenance issue, but what should have been done, and maybe that you have a record, there should have been a record of what rooms did we replace ceiling tiles, where were they wet? You probably have a record, that's probably where we tested, when they circled everything in yellow. We should then be going back to those areas and looking at the pipe.
Does that exist from Saturday and Monday?
No, we tested the rooms that we have current active leaks in
Okay.
You tested for?
the mold, yes.
So you don't have a record. I think what Jen is
Yes.
asking is, you do not
Yeah,
have,
we
There is.
ceiling tiles, no.
There-
you do not have a record of the ceiling tiles that were changed, whether they showed signs or didn't. You just tested the rooms that had
An active leak.
an act. So you changed ceiling tiles that there's no record of. There could be room whatever 29 could have had a tile change, but you don't have a record of it. Is that your question? Am I understanding your question, Jen? Is that along?
Well, my point is that ceiling tiles are being changed out in areas of the school that may not have been tested for mold, because there was only 2 areas tested, and they're all on different systems, so if it's...
We tested routinely throughout the whole building, if you look at the report. We
No.
came on Sunday and tested
No,
the whole building.
But ceiling...
Ms. O'Donnell, I would never want to speak for you, but is what you're trying to say that we went around and replaced these tiles and we didn't record the exact room?
No, what I'm saying
place
is you're
and-
hiding mold, was absolutely what I'm saying. I don't
No.
mince words either. I
No.
do think that you went through and replaced every ceiling tile, whether it was just a stain or if it was visible mold. But Kathy Forsythe said to me, and I'm surprised she's not here, since you're pawning me off on her to answer my questions, why wouldn't she be here knowing that I was gonna have questions? She said there was absolutely no visible mold on any ceiling tiles throughout this school that have been replaced.
Okay.
I have pictures from other areas of the school where there's absolutely moldy ceiling tiles, and they have been replaced.
If you
Okay.
have those pictures and you have the locations.
It's too late,
No,
they're
no,
gone.
no, because if you know those locations, we will climb up and we will look and see if the pipe wrap is a problem. Because if the roof leaked and it got the ceiling tile wet or moldy, it's metal. There's nothing in between, there's nothing for mold to grow on. That's fine, that gets thrown out in the trash.
Oh.
But if there's pipe wrap up there, then we'll go and we'll check. And if that, in that case, then they will replace the pipe wrap. So if anybody knows of any areas, we'll just go up there and we'll check.
One of the things I was going to say is, we have rarely, as administration, chosen which areas are tested. We have traditionally, since I've been here, tested any area where a staff concern was shared. So if we know, either we have visibly seen it or a staff member has complained. When we were doing the testing several years ago, and I know even this testing that we've done most recently, all of these areas that we went into were areas where someone expressed a concern. And so 2 or 3 years ago, I sat down with our senior building rep and asked, what are the areas that you're hearing about? If someone's afraid to say something, they think, I don't think I'm scary, but if someone's been afraid to report something and they have told it to you, help us devise this list. And so we went to at least 11 or 12 areas then. We picked any area that a staff member had suggested, and then also picked other random areas around the building to make sure that we were testing in all hallways were being tested, even if a complaint hadn't been made. But we have, to my knowledge, tested any room where someone actually expressed the concern. Over the years, we've tested that. So I don't think, my experience is we haven't really tried to hide from those things. We've tried to find out and find solutions to it. We absolutely...
The tiles have been up for at least a month. When I took the pictures of the band room and posted them online, then the mad rush of let's replace them, oh my gosh, we have to do it within 48 hours. They were literally up for at least 29 days.
I can't speak to how long it is.
I was just curious as to the dishonesty, because right now, that's probably not, and if it's not a big deal that they're changing out ceiling tiles, that's fine.
No,
I
it's not. You're
totally,
supposed to change them out as soon as
okay,
you
that's
see them.
great. I'm
I
just
think the
curious
bigger
as to why the
issue here-
dishonesty, that's all.
I think the biggest issue here
It's
is
absolute
that-
dishonest.
is that somebody who walks in that room all the time just didn't look up and didn't see the band room. And that they should have been changed out, but nobody saw it. When you said that, it was a maintenance issue, and
No doubt.
so,
It was up and down the main hallways that I was also taking pictures. So administrators, students, teacher, everyone should have seen. It was up and down the main hallways
I
on,
think now they'll be more vigilant.
on
Everyone
Tuesday.
will be looking up as they walk. We'll probably have people walking into each other, right?
That's what it takes.
Go ahead.
I have a, oh, I'm sorry, was that the?
Go ahead. Whatever. Go ahead.
I have a two-part question. One is the room that smelled and there was no reason found for the smell. What is that then? I
Okay,
mean,
well, we didn't find anything in mold or CO2, well, the CO2 was lower. There was a map there, okay? It was a very large map, and when you, because I'm looking around for anything at all that could smell. I'm in her cabinets and everything. So I lifted a piece that, and the map's been there for years, and the teacher is new to the room. So I got in between the maps and put my head between the maps, and I did smell like a paint kind of an odor. You know, it's plastic, so my guess is in the summertime, you know, those things smell, and, or they get hot and they start to give off the ink. So that was removed from the classroom. Then when we went back to the classroom, and the only time I smelled anything was when I got my face in between the maps. When we went back, and we were in and out of everything, I mean, I'm looking at her Sharpies, what she uses. I used a volatile organic compound instrument, which if you opened up a Sharpie right there, I would pick it up. If you open up a bottle of Windex, I'd pick it up. I got 0 on everything. And when we did go back, I smelled nothing. And we went back again on Sunday. I was there once, and then Chris, for another person to check, didn't smell anything. So So,
You went outside as well, didn't you?
yeah, we went outside to check the storm drains to make sure there were no gases in the storm drains, and there was nothing.
Did you check soil pipes? Aren't soil pipes connected? Are soil pipes connected to that classroom? Did we test them? They're not? Oh, there's no, okay.
The only thing that we thought that we thought maybe the HVAC was connected to the science lab, so we went to the science lab and did
But that's
VOCs,
another classroom.
and there was nothing, so.
So there was no known cause, but the smell was gone? Because
Okay.
your daughter's in that class.
I didn't smell
Better?
anything. When I walked into the room, I smelled nothing. But because I was trying to understand why, and I have a good nose, okay, so it's not like I don't smell well. The teacher was complaining, so I was determined to find something. I was opening up cabinets, going through everything, and the only time I smelled anything was when I was in between the maps. So just as a precaution, Sonny said, let's get rid of the maps in case we're giving off odors. But in the classroom itself, I didn't smell anything.
The second part of my question was the new health and safety committee. So any teacher or parent or whatever who has any concerns, like say your kid comes home and they have headaches or whatever, or they feel, or anybody has any kind of concern, they can go to that committee, and that committee will address with, like that, where they're saying the problem is? That's what the committee is? Like a safe place
Yeah.
to report concerns?
I don't know about any, I think today they were talking about, the committees would be like 6 to 8 people within the school building. Certainly if it was a health issue, I wouldn't advise a student to go see a committee. I would
Right.
advise a student to go see the school nurse or speak to their parent or guardian about going to their own private physician. But I think the concept of the committee is that if there is an issue in the building and it's not,
I feel like something's wrong in my room or whatever.
that's the concept.
Okay.
I hope
I just want to
it
be clear
yields
like
that.
that, okay.
And today, there was questions from the Mullen staff about if they find a leak, and Nancy indicated, like, I know that the protocols to take ceiling tiles and change them right away, but she's going to, if it's a chronic issue, she's going to try to make that monthly meeting somewhat time. Let's say it's a rainfall and it's somewhat chronic and we're not getting it fixed for some reason. She's agreed to come out and actually test in that area this for air sampling. We're trying to connect the dots a little bit
Right.
better.
So that committee would help identify the places where they could test monthly, like
Yes.
so and, okay.
Yes.
And if
Because
it's a
there's
rain
some
event, we don't want to
perception,
do it
there's
for
some
48
perception that, people aren't doing things on, like, and it's just, I think another way to communicate a problem within a building.
Right, okay. I just want to clarify that that's what that was and that it was indeed.
Yeah, I don't necessarily think it's the air safety committee either. I mean, there's a reason it's health and safety. If there's something inappropriate out on the playground, I would hope that it gets brought forward to
Okay,
the
so
same
it's
committee
broader
so
than
we can also
environmental
address
issues.
that.
Okay.
I have a couple of questions. I'm an educator in another district, and this kind of thing has happened actually in my classroom where you came in with a machine and everything. Is it my understanding that there's no ductwork in the ceilings, that everything is being somehow individually shot out?
In the new wing, there's ductwork, right? In the G wing, there's ductwork.
G-wing only.
Here, there's ductwork, but in the classrooms, they have univents.
Okay, and then, I know in our building, and I know in public schools, this is a problem for everyone. I don't know how you only have a couple people in your county doing this. First of all, they map. As an educator, you don't want those wet tiles in your classrooms that are going to potentially grow something funky. So I think it's a good idea that they are replacing them. It's not like they're hiding evidence. I think it's a good idea that they're agreeing to replace them. But they map, the custodians map where the tiles are getting wet or whether they see spots in the tiles with the wet. And if you're worried that they're not going to know, it's chronic. If you have that ceiling tile, basically when it rains or you have another big storm, I'm telling you that same ceiling tile, because they replace the same ones all the time. So it's not like they're gonna be hiding some big thing. But I know in my school district, which will remain nameless, they map, custodians map when they replace the tiles, so that when someone like you come in, you don't have to leave it open. We would have, I don't know, a quarter of the building, like we have trash cans where the roof leaks. And the reason why I was asking about ductwork is because they found in our building that the water travels. It's not where the roof is actually being repaired, where the leak is coming through. The water has some kind of line of travel and eventually for some reason stops and deposits and then drips down. So it may not necessarily be coming from a pipe. It's coming from the leak in the roof. It doesn't necessarily mean it's going to drip straight down and you're going to see it on that ceiling tile. That will have some kind of a path that may not be at that exact location. So I think it's important that we do go up because you don't want those funky ceiling tiles. Trust me, you don't. But it's important that you map them so that when they go up, they know where to look. And they actually had to try to find the path. The wings, and I don't really know the school that all my kids are only in 6th grade, the wings that have the ductwork, it would be nice if the inside of the ductwork could be tested. Because when we went through this in my school building, in my school district, all that mold thing came back fine, CO2 came back fine. We actually had high humidity, which was a problem that created mold. But when they went into the ductwork, they found interior that didn't show that it was being delivered through and that either the ducts had to be cleaned or in some cases they missed cleaning them. It was in the older section of the building and it had to be replaced. So
That's because you had a high humidity. If we had a high humidity, we would have done that, but our humidity was 19%.
I saw that.
So.
And then I was also, in my particular classroom, I had very, very high ceiling. And is there anything other, like organic irritants that are being tested that are not your common ones, like mold or something like that? Because when my room came back, personally as an educator, came back clear, I invited the superintendent and the building grounds person, come and smell this. I am not insane. Come smell this. And then they had somebody in addition come, and they found other irritants that weren't actually mold.
What did they find?
I can't even remember. I have a whole report of what it
Well,
was.
So the volatile organic compound meter that we use is non-discriminatory, so it won't tell us exactly what it is, but it'll pick something up in the air and let us know that something's there. So that way we can go and do further testing and try to eliminate, different types of chemicals and try to get down to the bottom of it, of what it actually is. So the reason we bring that volatile organic compound meter in is to try to find anything that may be in the air that, students and teachers are breathing in that's harmful to them.
And that reads in parts per million, okay?
Right.
If you wanted something that read in parts per billion, you're talking thousands of dollars for a vacuum canister to come.
Somebody came in with that thing. I know what that
Yeah,
thing is.
the vacuum canister is thousands of dollars, and unless at the county, we could do, as I said, formaldehyde, basic VOCs to ppm, mercury. We have an FID that will do organic compounds, but we're not going to go to the ppb level. We're only going to go to the ppm level, and science-based, I'm sure most of you know what that means. So if it's bad, we're going to find it. If it's one of those, say the janitor's closet was next door, and the janitor always dumps stuff down the mop sink, and you had, small smidgen of a chemical, we're not going to pick it up with our instrument. That helps you. But those vacuum canisters, we have no evidence to say that there's an issue and that we should recommend them because it's a lot of money, and we don't have any reason to believe that there is a chemical issue.
I have one more thing. Is the OSHA parts per million, that 5,000-ish parts per million, is that over the 8-hour day? Is that the same for adults as it is for children? It's the same?
Probably not, because time-weighted average is based on adults working, okay? So that's a good point. But still, we were only at 1,500. That's such a low level, so.
I was curious about something. this lady spoke of with the humidity in the ductwork. The humidity is low in the building now, but would it be higher in the summertime? And would it also be higher, say, at some point when the air conditioning was not working in there?
Well, the air conditioner, to my knowledge, is on all through the year, all through the summer, right? It's always
No,
on?
the air conditioner, no, it's always running. We didn't shut the air conditioner, so the humidity level should not be more than what it is now. I mean, right now it's winter time, you know, so it's a little bit drier. No, the system is always running.
But there was a
yes,
time,
it is in April, from April through September, yes, you are going to have a higher relative humidity outside as well as inside.
now, if there
That's
was
what the
a
air
time in the school where the air conditioning unit was broken, because there was a time when it was, let's say they get that fixed, would the mold still continue to live and grow?
Well, if you have a high relative humidity, you can have mold growth because you're going to have,
And then when the humidity goes back down, could the mold continue to thrive in the ductwork?
in the ductwork, I mean,
I
every
mean,
situation
The mold
is
doesn't have to
different.
thrive for it to give you an allergic reaction, because you can be allergic to dead mold as well, dead space. So either way, it's going to be in the air, it's going to be dispersed. So I don't really.
But in order for it to continue to grow, you need moisture. And
Well,
if you
I
don't
just
have moisture,
remember a time, and I think it was probably about a year ago, when the air conditioning wasn't working in the building.
For how long?
There was a concert in May for the band students, and the air wasn't on for that concert.
Okay, but if it was a month, yeah, I'd be concerned that you might have some condensation.
I'm not sure about the time period. I mean, maybe Mr. Trout would know better
I
how
think the
long
issue with
air
the
was
band
up.
concert wasn't that it wasn't working, it was just, we had new control systems going in, and they had shut off for the night, and we called to get them to turn it back on, and it was delayed. So it wasn't that it wasn't working at all, it just was getting warm in there at that time. But we have had periods, about a week, 2 weeks at the end of the school year, where it was down.
I think
when
maybe
the
I
chiller
remember
out
that
back-
too, because of the summer.
Yeah, the
music
chiller
program.
out back, the motor, was it?
Yeah, we service in the tower, yes.
There was an issue with that, and we had to get a part replaced, and that took a couple of weeks because they had to take it out. They actually had to get a crane to take it out, remove it, fix it, and bring it back.
Yeah, I think that's what I remember, because I think that was when the summer music program was going. There was no air in the building.
I mean, to have the air broken for a little while would not be a major concern.
Okay,
But,
well, I guess that's what I was.
but certainly if your maintenance is there looking around, they're going to see if you had some visible fungal growth.
Okay.
Okay, so that would be up to, hey, if the air's down for a couple of weeks, we want to go and we want to check and make sure that nothing grew.
Okay.
That's where the checking comes in.
What is it between the drop ceiling and the?
Absolutely nothing. That's why it's not really a problem, because I mean, it's always a problem when you have water coming in, but there's nothing there for mold growth. So if the water's coming in, as this lady pointed out, and it's so true, water can be leaking over there and it comes here, and then they come and they patch the roof here, and then the water still comes in.
There's no sheetrock?
There's nothing. It's a metal roof, and then it just drops down to the ceiling.
Besides the cinder blocks, is there sheetrock?
Well,
What type of insulating
Okay,
material?
in between the classrooms, it's just wallboard.
Right.
But the wallboards, we've checked it, it's dry. There's no water damaged wallboard. It always just comes straight down to the ceiling tile.
And the pipe wrap, you said you did not check it.
No, we checked a pipe wrap in the music room. We saw about a ½ an inch in probably, 4 locations? So they're going to remove that. It's very, very minor, but they are going to remove that. So in the future, when they take a ceiling tile down, we'll check it and see if there's a little bit. And in that case, they'll remove it.
I guess one of the other concerns, there are children that came into the school in 6th grade who are now having symptoms that they never had before. And how is that explained? I mean, they're now coming home with coughs, itchy eyes, bloody noses, sore throats. Like, how is that explained? When they never had them, they never had these symptoms outside of the school. They've been in here for 2 months, and now there's multiple children, exhibiting these types of ailments. And they're not just popping up in their heads. I mean, they're little, they don't know anything about this. They're coming home to this is what's sparking all this.
All I can tell you is what we test for and what the results are. Okay,
So
so
you can't explain why children are getting sick then? So we're just supposed to
Well,
accept that children are getting sick and that's it?
no, I'm not saying you should accept it, I'm saying that we're taking a proactive approach and we're sampling, and if we find something, we're writing a recommendation to the district, they're gonna act on that recommendation. That's the best that we can.
They're not getting sick from nothing, though.
Well,
They're
I mean-
not getting sick for no reason whatsoever. There is a reason, whether it's mold related or
Okay,
some
well,
reason,
are there
is a
more children, from a health perspective, are there more children in this school for them to interact with? Hence, there would be more germs where there's more people.
It's not a common cold they're coming home with. It's not a germ from catching a common cold, it's their fingers in plant. If they're coming home with symptoms they've never exhibited before outside of here. I mean, these are kids that go to trampoline things. If you're gonna tell me that
Do
this
they,
school's dirtier
do
than
they
that-
have gym every day?
No, no.
What are the symptoms?
And they don't have it every year, the whole year.
Yeah, and that's a good point, Mr. Realdo. I mean, I can't answer why certain children are sicker this year versus last year. All I can do is test this building and look around and find health and safety issues. Every time we look, if we find something, we have it corrected. That's all that we can do as a health department. If you tell us you want more testing, we're going to do it, and we're going to write a work plan. I don't care if it's a little bit of mold on a book. We're going to write a work plan, and we're going to come back, and we're going to check to make sure that it was done, and the district does that. Unfortunately, I have districts that I have to write violations against, because I find things and I write a violation. In this district, I don't have to write a violation. All I have to do is say, gee, we found this, and they fix it, and we come back and we check. So I can't comment on the spread of other things or higher asthma rates. I don't know.
This is more a question for you, I guess, Mr. Villadell. So this committee is going to be formed in all of the schools.
Health and safety committees?
Health and safety committee in all the schools.
Yes.
What type of information are you going to be passing to parents that's school specific? Right now, a lot of the blasts that come over the phone are very like general for the township. Will you be doing something like, there's a concern here, there's more of a concern here at this school? Is there going to be any effort made to make sure the parents here are informed? As of tonight, I understand not wanting to print out a billion copies and sending them out to all the kids home to their parents. Completely get that. But we live in a day and age where you can email blast everybody. Why was there not an email blast to every parent who has a child that attends here at Mullen? Most of us who get those bulk phone messages, honestly, hello, if it doesn't pick up right away, boom, hang up. That is not an effective way to reach parents.
I just want to follow along here. Are you saying that you would like an email blast of the reports the county produces?
I think that all the parents here, I bet if you made more of an effort to reach out to parents in the school, to notify them that there are concerns. There are some parents who are not involved. There are some parents who don't socialize with other moms and dads and guardians, who may not know that their child, oh, my child's complaining about this. My son, honestly, he's had no complaints. I'm here because of this kind of being something I've heard again and again.
Sure.
There are parents who may hear, well, gosh, Billy's not feeling well too, to kind of understand, like, there's other things coming through, that there are complaints being made, and maybe that will bring their attention to this matter. Without really, and I understand not wanting to publicize it. I get the downside of really pushing it out there. You could cause a hysteria. I understand that. But at the same token, you have a lot more parents here asking questions, holding you accountable. So if you're going to make this committee, are you going to reach out with the results each month to the parents? Like, you talk about being proactive. What about being transparent? I think on top of that, you want to be proactive. This is another piece of it.
Sure.
Reaching out to the parents just of Mullen. This is, nobody in any other middle school needs, you don't need to go out to Will Landing and tell them about this, or C.W. Lewis, but the parents here,
Sure.
I think all this
So
information.
there's already going to be a monthly report
I
similar.
get that, but it's going to be out where somebody's got to go get it. You're not going to give it to them.
Okay.
I can
Whole
address
public
this a
record
little
thing.
Is there a
The
Mullen-based
Home and
page?
School Council, we have a website and we have a Facebook page. which I maintain for them, I'm more than happy. In fact, today I was going to scan all these on my home computer
And
and post them as a PDF, and I would be happy to continue to do that.
I think that is fantastic, and I think that's great, but I think some ownership needs to go over here. Because not everybody's on Facebook. Like, they're just in every single
Well,
avenue.
we have a website as well.
I get it, but you're then putting the onus on the parent.
To go
I
find
think
it.
this is, you know, if I don't, honestly, I'm gonna tell you right now, I follow Facebook, but I'm not gonna go on the webpage. I want something sent to me. If this is this big of an issue, where we have the county coming in to bring in test rooms in the school, we should be notified. You know what? If there was a pedophile that got ripped out of the school, a teacher was arrested for child pornography, guess what? We'd be getting an email, we'd be getting some sort of press release directly to us, but we're not. It just, there is no accountability. You're putting it off on, you know, you're putting it off on him, you're putting it off on the janitorial staff. You wouldn't answer her emails, you're putting it off on here. You're saying, oh, we'll do this, we'll do that, but what are you gonna do to make sure that you follow through on your end? Don't just create the committee, but continue to be a part of the solution and not just, this happened before. This happened before in the school 2 years ago, but we're here, right back where we're at. You're only gonna have them here for a year, which is fantastic. I actually know Nancy outside of this. I am very comfortable in what Nancy is telling me and answering questions. I don't have an issue with that. Other people may, but I'm good with what Nancy has said, and he as well. But what are you going to do to make it easier for parents to be informed and to notify them so they take more of an active part? There are parents, yes, who may not even care, may not come out. But without you reaching out, I feel like you're just hiding it and you're hoping for it to just kind of, all right, these are the noisy parents right now. You know Jen's name, you know my husband's name. We're very, you know us. I want to get to the point where you're notifying other people instead of just worrying about this group of people that shows up.
Sure. Okay, well, I know that we're going to be getting information from the county. We're going to be getting minutes from the safety. We're going to talk administratively, and I will speak to you, Mrs. Filier, and see what the best form to communicate that out.
Notifying everybody via email, sending out the reports via email, or a link where each time it's updated. Can you commit to doing that? I think that's very important.
Sure, we're going to commit to finding out the best way to communicate that stuff out to parents. I don't know tonight the answer.
How many different methods will you commit? Honestly, like I really, at this point right now, I really feel that's a big issue. How many ways are you going to commit to notify parents? Like right here and right now, it's not a big deal. It literally requires a press of a button. You load email addresses, send it out. How hard is that? You can do a phone blast and you notify. Can you commit to doing, if you're going to do a phone blast in regards to this, why can't you commit to like emailing a link so that any parent at any time, okay, there's been an update, notified, then the parents know to go on and read, should they want to read, but at least you've given them the information. Every time there's an update.
I get every week a house phone, my cell phone, and an email from Mullen.
Agreed, but did they mention anything
Would
about
you do
this?
that? Do you
Right,
send home a
like in
monthly
that include the link.
I think as building administration, like, now that we're forming this group, in committee, like, yeah, that's one of the things that can be included with text messaging, emails.
Okay, well, will somebody here tonight commit to including the link where every week, somebody then, if a parent has a question about it, they can go and see all these reports, the update, and the minutes from the Health and Safety Committee. If it's, where an email's already going out, all you have to add is one more. Will you guys commit to doing that tonight?
Once that committee is completely formed and we start getting all the reports and everything,
Okay.
I have no problem committing to making sure the parents are informed and you have the link, and you do receive the information.
To
There's
all the
no problem.
reports and notify them
Yes.
there's an update?
Yes, there's no problem.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. I feel that this really was not, aside from if you're in the right Facebook group, a lot of people missed what was going on. If you're in the, just finishing. Thank you very much. Everybody take your time.
I just have a quick question. Is this a sick building? Do you think this is a sick building?
I don't.
You don't? Were the teachers told earlier at the 2:30 meeting that this is a sick building?
No, they were told that there's one teacher that has had some issues, and I don't remember his exact words. This is, we don't consider a sick building syndrome. But it would be up to the individual. The individual that goes home every day and says, I don't feel good.
And the children and the teacher? Like, does
Yeah,
it take a
that's-
certain
that's
amount
the
of
question.
people for?
There's obviously there's definitions for sick building
Right.
syndrome.
And it's a lot of different
And-
things together, and mold is one.
But there's no specific, I mean,
Just that people are getting sick every day.
but people get sick every day everywhere, you know? I mean, there's sick people. When you have a lot of people, you have germs. Hence why we don't come around.
People don't
to
get
biological-
lightheaded every single day of their lives. People don't get headaches and come home with headaches every single day of their lives.
Well, that's an individual.
It's a lot of
If an
individuals from the
individual-
school. It's a lot of individuals from the school. I was just curious if it takes a
I mean,
certain amount of
I have a
people.
bioaerosols book, okay? I can look, I don't have it with me, but I can look up the definition of sick building syndrome for you. Do I know it off the top of my head? I don't remember
Right.
what it is.
Or
Not
I was
gonna
just
lie,
curious
I
if
do.
it takes a certain amount of people going home not feeling well to say, hey, maybe this is a sick
No, it's
building,
an
let's look
individual
into
problem.
other
If you
things.
If you have a classroom where there's a couple of people that say they don't feel good, we go check that classroom. You can't classify a whole
Kind of
building.
touch on what you're saying is, we're not brought in until we receive a complaint from either a teacher, a parent, you know, from a student going home, or the board brings us in and asks us to check something out. So until we do that, until we receive that complaint, we have no way of knowing if there's an issue going on here. So from that, we can only give you answers from the scientific data that we record
Right.
and that we receive.
Well, I was told that earlier, the teachers were told that this is a sick building.
No, that's not true. I was at the meeting.
Were you here?
That was not said.
Okay.
Sick building syndrome is an individual syndrome. It's not on a building, it's on an individual that has a chronic complaint.
Got it.
And that individual may not be affected by anything in the building. They might even be affected by stress.
I just have a quick question. Is there trained dogs that could come in and just do the sweep of the
They're not
entire
effective.
school grounds?
They're not effective.
They're not, okay.
Nancy, I talked to you on the phone, but with what they were saying about the sick child, you know, my daughter is one of them. She's not had any issues until she started at home. And I didn't realize or put two and two together that it could be caused of mold, because she was coming home with headaches, nauseousness, coughing, sneezing, and the biggest sign of it was the nosebleeds. My daughter's never had nosebleeds until she started, and that's when I started to look into it, look into the mold and the symptoms from the mold, and that was one of the signs, was the nosebleeds.
Well, nosebleeds are usually from dry air. The air is under 30% relative humidity. And as far as mold goes, yes, if there was a lot of mold spores here, you could obviously produce symptoms. But we didn't have any of the areas that we tested did not produce high mold spores. We have certain levels we go off of. Aspergillus, penicillium, we go off of 800. If it's under 800, it's low. If it's over 800, you do a remediation. We didn't have that.
Okay, but the tests that you took were recent tests. You're
We just took
talking
them on
October-
Sunday. We just took
October,
tests on
November,
Sunday.
Of just a few of the rooms. The school was just recently gone.
I tested the G-Wing in October, I tested the band room on Thursday, and then I did random of problemed areas on Sunday. But what we're looking for is if there's certain, like your child has some issues, we'll test your child's room. We're going to be back doing more tests, and if we know that there's certain areas of concern, we'll test them.
Okay.
And also, during our inspection, what we look for is the relative humidity levels. If we're going through certain classrooms and we have elevated relative humidity levels, we're going to take samples in that classroom because you're going to have a potential for fungal growth if you have that elevated relative humidity. But we didn't find that anywhere throughout the building. Everything is around, between 25 and 19%, which is perfect for mold. The less moisture you have in the air, the less chance you have for fungal growth. But on the other hand, like Nancy said, the dry air could cause some nosebleeds and other symptoms. So.
Right, and I understand with the dry air during the winter time, because I understand that, and I understand that the tests show that it's low, it's a low humidity right now. But, this started in September, as soon as she started. She's never had those.
Well, then that would be a room that we should sample.
Right, and I know that you can't speak to that. So I am taking her to an allergist and
had the mold test done and things like that, to help me determine what mold she is allergic to, and if there were found in the school to help correlate the issue. But one of my questions is,
Do you want to give us room numbers now, or do you want to just?
We'll get it to you.
You'll get them, okay.
Yep.
Sure, I'll get back to you, but one of my questions as well is, you said that you're going to do tests monthly. How are we determining what rooms are going to be tested? Is it the whole school, or is it specific areas?
It's going to be where you think there's a problem.
And that's where that committee that's coming together is going to get together and figure out the problem areas and try to hit on them as much as possible, which is why it's important to get that together as soon as possible, so we know each month when we're going in that there's leaks in these areas consistently, test these areas, and then if there's other areas of concern that pop up, we'll go through those as well.
Okay, a sick building syndrome is used to describe situations in which building occupants experience acute health and comfort effects that appear to equal to time spent in the building, such as headaches and respiratory problems attributed to unhealthy, stressful factors in the work environment or poor ventilation.
Is that from the bioaerosols book? Is that from the bioaerosols?
That's a definition.
We just use the ACGIH guidelines.
But you didn't know what it was, so I was just.
No, I do know what it is. I'm not going to, she's taping me, so I'm not going to give a definition and then have it all over YouTube that I missed 5 words of the definition.
Right, which is definition.
Okay, I'm intelligent enough not to let that happen.
Do you want me to pause it? I'll pause it for you.
No, I'm just saying, you know, when
Okay.
you're being taped, you're not going to,
That's all
I
right.
can rattle off the molds and where they grow,
I
but
won't
they
pause
use
it for
certain
you.
definitions I don't
I
remember
don't pause
without my
it for you.
reference materials.
This is never an accurate account?
Never. Edited. I am not that fat on video. Let me tell you something, I'm a lot skinnier.
It's actually from Mr. Villadon. So I like the idea of mapping when they remove and replace the ceiling tile. Is that something that can be implemented here? Because I don't believe it is. I know I've asked for ceiling tiles to be removed in the school store before, and I know that they weren't mapped. You know what I'm saying? I mean, that's not a bad idea, and it's probably not a bad policy for maintenance to start doing.
It's a good idea.
If they could map, and then you know if that's a chronic area, and you guys obviously, you should be knowing because you're coming out and checking. But I mean, it's not a bad idea for the maintenance guys to also keep track of.
You're welcome.
Constantly removing ceiling tile number 4 and, you know,
Well, we do that to some degree,
okay.
and we've had some success over time with fixing leaks in certain areas. And the difficult thing is, you know, with roofs, sometimes depending which way the wind's blowing and the
Right,
rain's
right.
falling, so sometimes a leak might not show up one time and it does show up another time. But the custodian would regularly come around and let us know areas that there were issues, and I know we would give it to Mr. Umar, and that's part of when you saw, I know the board was questioning at a recent board meeting, you know, that there was a contract going out for someone to come do some repairs on the building, and that is how we identify areas that have to be, the roof needs to be addressed. But on a big, we talked about it being 175,000 square feet, the roof square footage is usually even more than that because you've got angled roofs and all of that sort of thing. So there's a lot of roof up there, and so they'll come, they'll patch things up. I've crawled around in the roof, I followed them. We had district people when I first came here up there working on it. They were having some success, other areas they weren't. We brought in outside contractors, so we have, it's just been ongoing, and sometimes you seem like you fix one leak and another one pops up somewhere else. And so there has been, but as far as I guess what I'm a little confused on, which again, when there's tens of thousands of individual tiles, are we tracking individual tiles?
From what
Gets
Deb
to be a
Hines
little
said,
bit.
It sounded like that's what she was saying from District 1.
I have an idea.
I don't, we are tracking rooms that have leaks and so forth. That we have had data that they would collect that and mark off a room that had a leak, and then they would show the person where the leak was and so forth. But as far as individual tiles, one tile might get wet one month, and then the next time it rains, depending, maybe it goes another couple tiles over. So that's why I don't know the value of tracking individual specific tiles. Seems a little bit.
Probably
A
easier
through
just to
Z
check
go
it while
this
they're up
way
there.
from the
See
door.
what's going on while they're
1, 2, 3
changing
go
them, right?
this
'Cause they're
way,
already there.
B12.
They're already on the
Well, I
left.
didn't know if there was anything like mandated or noted, you know, I know you're saying it gets passed on if there's a chronic area or something like that, but is anything officially noted, like we changed so many tiles in this room or so forth?
I think that has to be part of what due diligence is on custodial maintenance, but also that information somehow, Sonic, has to get relayed to the Health and Safety Committee. Otherwise, they're going to have incomplete data. There's no point to it. And I think mapping the ceiling is a good idea for both what Chris and Nancy have done, and will continue to do. But I know we're closing in on 2 hours here, so if anyone hasn't had a question, I'd like to ask it now. Or if anyone hasn't taken a video that would like to take a video.
I have plenty, it's fine.
Yes.
I have an idea.
Yes, ma'am.
The tile map, you know, and this is kind of funny, but you know, when you go to Target and they have on the back of the door, who's in the bathroom, the date, the time, and all that, you do that, and you put it in each classroom, and then they just mark it off the wall.
Then it's held accountable.
That's a good idea. Well, I do want to let you know that Mr. Costa is a graduate of Van Mullen and Stockton University, and he lives around the corner, so I know that he says he's somewhat independent, but I do think that they've been here enough. They are invested into making sure that all the school buildings here are healthy and healthy township. I know that everyone's concerned. Please understand we're trying to be transparent, okay? We just learned of these unsatisfactory conditions last week, and we're all in here early this week to talk about what has been done and what we will continue to do as the months go forward. So please relay to your children, they're in a healthy building, at least that's what the scientific evidence says. We're not going to now just say, okay, everything's good, and we're all going to grab our stuff and leave. We will continue to test. We will continue to send evidence to all of you about what the conditions of this building are. So I appreciate you coming out. Obviously, the Board of Education, we have members here tonight, the administration, we have central office here, and school administration. We've had a similar meeting today with all, well, it was offered to all the staff. Obviously, those concerned also came, and we stayed and answered every question that they had. I don't know how they felt when they went, but we're going to continue to communicate with all of you what we're doing here. So please, if you have anything that hasn't been asked here tonight, either send it to Mr. I guess Caesar, the last administrator here, or send it to my office, and I will get back to you. Thank you for coming. And I do appreciate Nancy and Chris coming out tonight. I do think that, you know, they have been out here 5 times this year already. They'll be out more, and they'll continue to report. Thank you.
Thank you.